and just kind of share what's working and what are the challenges with your FBA BIP process?
What is working? My schools are.
And Dave, you're from West Dallas, right?
Yes. West Dallas.
You have how many schools?
Dave Stanley, West Dallas, West Milwaukee School District. I'm the district PBIS coach. I have 18 schools.
Okay.
So what is working? The schools that are using it effectively, and they're having an impact on the student behavior. The ones that are continuing to struggle, regardless of the other interventions, I'd say probably close to 80% of the students that we develop an FBA for, they're being successful. We have
what percentage?
About 80%.
Wow, that's great.
I've modified some forms that I share with my coaches that they use that kind of walk them through it. One is the competing pathways form that's out there that tends to really help my coaches and those tier 2 members kind of look at, okay, what is the function and how are we going to help these students be successful. So those are being successful. The biggest challenge is finding the people in the building that have any sort of knowledge whatsoever around FBA BIPs that aren't the special ed people, and then training those people who are willing to do it and how to do it. So I spent a good chunk of time with my coaches teaching them how to do the FBA BIPs, through the first 1 or 2 until they get comfortable with the process.
Mm-hmm. So you're training non-special ed staff?
Correct. A lot of it's, a lot of them are like our student services people who are serving on the tier 2, and that piece tends to fall to them.
Yeah.
And they don't have necessarily that background that a lot of the special ed people do through the development of IEPs and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Lori, Josh said they're not up to speed yet on FBA BIPs.
Okay.
And so we're just wondering if there's anyone else that would like to share on what's working and what are the challenges.
Tarika, can I ask you to unmute and share what's happening in Madison?
I am having connection problems, so I heard I heard my name in part of the question.
I was wondering if you could share some successes you're having with the FBA BIP process and what challenges you're experiencing in Madison.
Okay. I feel
okay, we were hearing you until just now, and then we can't hear you.
complex one for students who are in special education, and just getting the teachers to shift and think about with the brief FBA that its own behavior and really looking at one environment has been difficult, because generally teachers really want to work on every single thing that's happening with the student in every single environment, and it's hard to sort of monitor what's working and what isn't for the brief FBA. So I think that would probably be one of the challenges, is just really getting teachers to understand, really focusing in on one behavior.
Okay. And you cut out for the beginning of that, so were there any successes that you wanted to share? Was there anything else that I missed?
Yeah, I think that most of our student services folks know what it is and how to use it.
Okay. Great, thank you. Let me see.
So Kim is here for Fond du Lac. Kim, do you have schools that are utilizing the brief FBA BIP process?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch all of that.
Do you have schools that are utilizing the brief FBA BIP process?
I think Fond du Lac doesn't have a mic.
Oh.
I think they have. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So she said that her psychs coordinate the process.
Okay.
So can you expand on, oh, she's looking to get more involved. Okay.
Jessica, I know that your mic works. Can you unmute and kind of share what's happening in Crandon?
I kind of feel the same way as Fond du Lac, that the special ed utilize it. I think our Dean of Students do it, but I myself don't feel comfortable, so I was hoping to just become more familiar with the process myself.
Okay. Okay.
And I'm not sure if, Beth, I don't think you have a mic either, but if you could let us know where you're at, if you're actively utilizing brief FBA BIPs, or if you're looking for more information from today as well.
I believe Beth and Kimberly don't have mics, so they'll be writing whatever they have. I'm not sure if Josh had to leave. Okay. And okay, so I think I'm going to move on, and then as people are typing, then Stephanie will let me know what some of the successes or challenges are. So what I want to do is basically review some of the key points having to do with the brief FBA BIP, and then we're going to hear from Brian from Sturgeon Bay about how they've been using it, and then we're just going to kind of open it up so you can ask questions of him, and we'll just kind of be networking around this. So basically, and I liked what I heard in terms of when people were talking about who's doing it. Just in terms of roles, we have the Tier 2 external coach, and we also have the systems team leader or the Tier 2 leader. And then you have someone who's coordinating all of the different interventions, and specifically today we're looking at who's coordinating the problem-solving team, which is the brief FBA BIP process. So you have a coordinator of that, and the coordinator basically, referrals come to the coordinator, and they will then assign a facilitator to do the FACT, create a pathway, and you know, create a temporary BIP and present that to the team, refine it, and then it's up to the facilitator to progress monitor on a weekly or bi-weekly basis to see if that plan is actually being implemented and to see if that implementation is being effective. And if not, calling the team back and re-looking at some pieces. So what I liked and what I was hearing is it sounds like you are trying to get more expertise in the building in terms of who can be facilitators, who can do this process. So I think it's really good to begin looking outside of the special ed staff because I think the more ownership and the more understanding there is with the regular ed staff, I think that also helps in terms of what is happening at the meeting. I think someone said that the pathway really helps teachers understand what the whole point of the process is in terms of looking to see what the function of the behavior is to better get a sense of how you can alter the environment to support good student behavior. So in terms of how this flows, there are some key pieces that we spent a lot of time in training with. We have the antecedents. We have the slow trigger, which is something that's really infrequent, that affects and keeps the consequence going and makes it more likely that the fast trigger will trigger the behavior of concern. Okay, so for example, a setting event might be an altercation on the bus on the way to school. The fast trigger might be the teacher redirects the students during math. And when there has been something that happened on the bus, it's more likely than when the teacher redirects a student during math that the student will begin swearing and throw their paper, whatever it is that the misbehavior is. So it's like the setting event just makes it more likely that the trigger will happen. And then you have what the behavior of concern is, and you want to be very specific about what that is. In this instance, it might be that the student swears, the student throws their paper. They do this probably 50% of the time when asked to be redirected by the teacher during independent work in math class. So as specific as you can so you can really picture what it is. And then the maintaining consequences. This isn't necessarily, there's a consequence that the teacher might do, which is that they reprimand the student. But then there is, other things that might be happening in the environment at that time, such as everyone pays attention to the student, or the teacher's attention. So you're trying to look at what the actual, you're looking at consequences a little bit differently. Why is the student having that outburst? Is it maybe that they want to get the attention from their peers or from their teacher? What is it that's maintaining it? A lot of times, for instance, the teacher will give a consequence such as removing the student from the environment because they were having they were really acting inappropriately, and that's what's in their consequence T-chart. And the maintaining consequence may be avoidance of a task that they didn't want to do. Well, then the teacher inadvertently reinforced that when you throw your paper on the floor and when you swear at me, I will remove you from the class and then you won't have to do this math problem. So it's kind of a tricky thing, kind of looking to see what is the maintaining consequence. And then we have the desired behavior. What you really want is for when the student is redirecting, that they take that redirection and they continue working. But then there is some place in between having a fit, and I'm not saying this in correct language, I'm just being brief here, but somewhere between this behavior of concern, which is throwing their paper down and swearing at the teacher, and taking the redirection appropriately, there has to be something in between so that you can begin to shape the desired behavior. So what is maybe not perfect behavior, but something that's acceptable to the teacher? And that might be something like that the student still is not going to be redirected, but they remove themselves and they go to the back of the room rather than causing a scene in the classroom. So it's not desirable because they're still avoiding the behavior, but at least they're not taking the whole class off task. And eventually you keep changing this until it begins to get closer and closer to the desired behavior. So another piece here is to be able to do this, you gather information with the facts. And we're going to show you how Sturgeon Bay altered their form so that it was more friendly for their particular staff. And you're getting key information to help you fill out the pathway that I had just shown you. And once you have the fact and you filled out the pathway, the next piece in the process is that you have to come up with and this is all before the meeting, and I think it's nice to sit down with a colleague to try and figure out a behavior intervention plan. And we made this form very, very simple, and it has 4 different categories. What can you do to address the setting event and the trigger? What can you do to address any teaching that has to happen, either to make the plan work or in terms of replacement behaviors? and what might be some consequences both for when the misbehavior occurs that may be less likely to reinforce the misbehavior, and also some positive consequences that will reinforce the replacement behavior. So what I did here is, this is just something that actually Emily shared with me that I really like. My sheet was always a big mess, and then we cross things out. But what she suggested is just putting Post-its with all these different ideas that you brainstorm of possible things that you can bring to the meeting to discuss. So this is an example of an actual student that we did. Was a kindergarten student, and this particular student, he would crawl on the floor. He would bother other students. He would anytime he was asked to do something that he didn't want to do. It was very much they felt it was attention-seeking behavior. And it was disrupting the whole class, and it happened frequently throughout the day. They had a lot of people thinking about this student because it was actually more of a complex behavior pattern than a brief behavior pattern, but it came to the team because he had just been referred for ED coming out of K4, and the team had met over the summer, and they didn't have enough information, so he wasn't placed. So this was a student, they needed to do something. So what we decided to do was we just focused and treated it as though it was a brief FBA, and we just focused on one particular behavior, and what it was his behavior during carpet time. And what we wanted him to do was, if he was asked by the teacher or redirected, that instead of disrupting the whole group, that he go and talk to an assistant. They actually had an assistant that was in the room. So we came up with all of these different things. Meds for ADHD was something that had been talked to with the family for many, many times. But at the meeting, even though it was here, at the meeting, we didn't really actually do that piece. I'm just going to, sorry. But these are some of the things we came up with. And then when we got to the meeting, there were things that the teacher didn't think they'd want to do. And so one of the things, that the principal had said was that they eliminate carpet time for the whole class and use individual whiteboards instead. Well, the teacher just wasn't willing to do that, and I was in agreement with her. So that one came off the table. Again, I said we didn't even discuss meds because that had been talked about before. The teacher uses sticks to call on students. One of the problems here was that the student would have a fit every time he wasn't called on. And so she wasn't willing to do that, but she was willing to call on him more frequently. She was willing to give him points for that he could earn for good carpet behavior, and she was willing to have him choose to sit either at the carpet or the desk. When it came to some of the teaching pieces, so using social stories to learn and understand and generalize school routines, she didn't want to do that one. And we had all of these different things that maybe he could earn for earning points for the classroom. And we were trying to do social contingency, so we had a lot of things that he could earn for the whole class, and she didn't feel that would be very effective. But the one thing that she really did like was that he could pick a toy from the toy box. And so they did that piece. Check and check out was something that he had been on, and she didn't feel that that was working for him, so they actually took that out, the actual intervention, although they still did monitor his behavior with the DPR form. OWL was when he was having, that's the OWL team where you have some people in the school, and if the student is having a tantrum, you call on an intercom, you say, I need the OWL team, they come in, they say who, and they deal with the student so that you can continue with your lesson. And I think we kept that one in place and removed from the setting, and then when he's removed from the setting, he couldn't earn points. So one of the things that happened with this meeting is that the father was there, and in the past, the team felt that he really didn't take this behavior very seriously. He thought it was kind of funny. Well, during the course of the team meeting, one of the things that was very cool was he could really see all of these different things we were doing to shift the environment so that his son could be more successful. And he began suggesting some really appropriate things to do. So he was actually a part of this in terms of what we decided to do with, I put his name Casey here. And one of this plan was super successful actually. And one of the things that happened, even though we didn't have ADHD on here, is that the family did go and they did go the medication route. And the combination of this plan and the medication, it was a totally different student. And because we got him in kindergarten, I think it really helped in terms of the projected success of the student throughout school. So one of the things that is important here in terms of planning is that you have a document once you come up with that BIP of what the tasks are, who's responsible by when, review date, and what the decision is. Do you need to modify the plan, discontinue it, yeah. So I have a question for those of you who are doing the brief FBA BIP, and that is, what are you currently doing to determine if the plan has been successful? So I'm going to kind of throw that out, and if people can please unmute and kind of share what they do.
Hi, it's Dave. For the, I just drew a blank on what I was going to say. We meet typically every 4 to 6 weeks after the development of a plan, and a lot of it's based on, is it points? Are we seeing a reduction in referrals or incidences within the classroom? If something big happens, we will meet prior to that follow-up meeting to adjust as needed, and make sure that we're following that behavior plan as we set it out. But if we also have the understanding that it's not going to change. Usually in the first week, it takes a couple weeks for everything to get in place and take hold. So that's why we set that 4 to 6 week piece. But a lot of it's based on records, teacher records and referrals, etc.
Okay. So, but it sounds like you know that it takes a week or so for the plan to be in place. So how can you tell that? Is it just by records?
That's as far as taking time to take hold. Is that your question?
No. How do you know? Like, if you say that you're going to teach say the teacher is going to take the student out and well, in this case, for instance, the psychologist was going to take the child out and reinforce some second step lessons. So say that was in the plan. How would you be able to tell if that was done or not?
Oh, those things are scheduled. And then those people are if they're doing that, then they keep a log and they track if they're meeting what was discussed on what date. So if they're meeting on Tuesdays and Thursdays, they say we took them out on this date and this date. We met for 15 minutes. This is what we worked on.
And so is that like on a Google Doc, or like do you have something like this that's a Google Doc and people just share as they go through?
It depends on the school. Some of my schools do a Google Doc. Some of them, the individual people involved keep their own records, and when we come back together to re-meet, they have their information with them.
I got it. Great. Can someone else share about how you monitor to make sure that the plan is actually being implemented? And I see Sarah joined us from 21st Century Prep. Thank you, Sarah. Welcome.
For us, I think it's important to have follow-up meetings. Sometimes what we found with the brief FBA is that there is this comprehensive meeting to come up with a plan for a student. In the end, the it's in a folder somewhere, so having those follow-up meetings with the team to just sort of check in on progress and then to see how things are going and if any tweaks need to be made.
Okay, thank you. Was that Tarika?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I think this is one of the trickiest pieces. I think what the research says is it's one of the places where FBA BIPs fall apart is you have a great plan and then it's not followed through on. So I think that piece is really important. I want to make sure we have time for, for Brian to share. So just a few more slides here. One of the key pieces is to progress monitor, and the facilitator should be doing this on a weekly or bi-weekly basis at the longest. And again, the things that got the student in terms of progress monitoring and identifying success, it really, when you get to the problem-solving team, it really is more individualized. You do have some criteria for what sends a student to the team for this intervention, which has to be considered, but there probably are some very unique things that have to do with the student, and that's what you want to focus on when you're progress monitoring. I think, again, minors are much more sensitive to behavior change than majors. Attendance, like in this instance, we didn't use the check and check out as an intervention, but we did use the DPR. So then the teacher just completed it. I think they had a Google Doc or something like that, so that they could still, they had some way of being able to track improvement in behavior. So I'm not going to do this right now. I'm going to go back, and I would like us to actually talk about Sturgeon Bay. So Brian, can you unmute and kind of share about what your process is? And I'm going to pull up the form that you shared with us so we can take a look at that.
Hey, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So I'll start off. Morning. We'll start off by saying we're a small school district, and we're using this in just one of our schools. It's at 3 grade levels, grades 3, 4, 5, 250 students, and our team is pretty small. We have 3 people that do the bulk of the work that we're talking about. Downside is that it's a lot of work. Upside is when we need to make changes and just make adaptations, we can do that on the fly, and it's a much simpler process. We don't have the same layers that a larger district might have, so that's helpful. What we did is we had a request for assistance process, so a student was struggling, teachers could ask for assistance. We had forms for that, and we had forms for FBAs, and just it seemed like a really clunky process for us. So we looked at ways to just put it all together in one package so we could make those meetings more efficient and get our work done so we could focus on just helping the student. So we cooked up, I call it a request for assistance behavior support plan, and there's different parts to it. So it's all one packet or a collection of forms, but part 1 I just give to the teacher to fill out when they need to make a referral for a student, and then part 2 is filled out by usually me, where I collect school-wide data, ODR data, attendance, etc.
So why don't I kind of show them, this is part 1.
Right, so this is what the teacher would fill out. So looking at strengths and weaknesses, and they could type it or write it, it doesn't matter. And we try to make this, again, as efficient as possible, so check boxes where it made sense and places for teachers to write.
Mm-hmm.
I like this part because it for some of our teachers, you know, have you tried everything that you could try as a classroom teacher? Maybe there's some things that you haven't tried yet. Maybe there are other things that you could be doing. And then the second section, part 2, again, that's the school-wide information, pretty basic stuff. Again, attendance, ODR data, interventions that we may have tried with the student.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get into we'll have people fill this out, and then we'll have a meeting date, and they'll bring their paperwork, I'll bring my paperwork, and we sit down with our special ed teacher in our building. She's amazing, and she's really dived into the FBA process, and she'll do most of the work with the teacher in the meeting and walk through and ask the questions you need to ask about the student, so we can try to figure out, what the issues are, what may be driving the student's behavior. And
so, am I understanding this correctly? Are you doing this piece at the actual problem-solving meeting?
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
Yep.
How long does that take?
About 45 minutes, depending on the teacher and the student we're talking about. We try to get through it in about 45 minutes.
Okay.
And we go through it. There's a lot there, but somebody mentioned this earlier. I think our staff is getting a handle on this. When we first started doing this, I think teachers wanted to fix everything that was going on with the student, and you can't do that. So I think they've understood that let's focus on the issues that are of the greatest concern, and then narrow in on one. And when you can get them to do that and really start thinking about that biggest concern, this process goes a lot faster. So that's helped speed things up quite a bit, because otherwise you have a half-hour conversation about all the issues the student might be having, and it's kind of like spinning your wheels.
Mm-hmm.
When we did this last year, we had a hard time with being successful with this, because we weren't really getting at the motivation, the consequences for some of the students that we tried this on. So we thought for one gentleman it was he was trying to get peer attention. It wasn't. He was trying to avoid tasks. Sometimes it's really hard to see it. Mm-hmm. Jess Schomburg, our special ed teacher, she's the one again that does a lot of this work, and she's getting better at when she's in the classroom. She'll do an observation of the student. So she'll do an observation before we fill out part 4, because the teacher's identifying an area that, like in math class, you're going to see this behavior. So she'll be in that math class, take notes, and that she's gotten better at identifying what is making the student tick.
So you have basically 2 meetings, and one is kind of like an intake meeting.
Right.
Am I understanding that?
Yeah. So we have one meeting of what's going on, what do you think is driving the student's behavior, where's this behavior occurring the most. Then we schedule some time for Jess to go into the classroom, observe the student, and then we meet again to do part 4 of the behavior support plan. Mm-hmm. And identify what we're going to do to support this student. Everybody signs off saying, yep, this is what we're going to try. And then we'll come back together in typically 2 to 3 weeks and see how things are going.
Mm-hmm. So how long does it take between when you have your intake meeting and when you have your meeting where you actually come up with the pathway and the BIP?
Depends on how soon Jess can get in to do an observation, and then she has a pretty busy day already, so whenever she's able to get her notes together, typically about a week. We try to do this as fast as we can. Mm-hmm. So within a week's period, we're able to meet again.
I'm going to point out one just legal issue that has come up, I know, in a lot of the trainings that I've done, and that has to do with parent permission. Right. And what I have heard the most recent is that one way to deal with this is there's a couple issues here. One is if you put into your parent-teacher handbook that this Tier 2 process, including the brief FBA BIP, is considered part of what you do with all students, then you can do the, let's see, I don't know, it's like the family can opt out, but you don't need signature for permission. And the second thing has to do with the use of special ed staff, and that has to do with funding in terms of how you fund the special ed staff. If they're 100% funded with a certain funding, then they are more restricted in terms of what they can do with students. So those are just some things logistically in terms of setting up the system. There's ways that you can set the system up to begin with, to give yourself more flexibility in how you use staff and the whole issue around parent consent. I still think it's a great, you do have to get family involvement at this level. So just because you don't have it as a consent doesn't mean that they're not involved. They should be very, very involved in the process.
Those are good points. Our special ed staff, I don't know the ratio off the top of my head, but they are partially funded in a way where we're able to use them to help with regular ed students. Mike, the language for the parent handbook, that's a good point. I have to look into that. Usually at this point, so far, with the students that we're talking about, parents are really frustrated. I've been talking to them quite a bit. They welcome the schools doing something to try to help their child. But having something in there, you're right, would be a good add-on.
So Lori,
go ahead.
We had a question about the difference between a brief and a complex FBA BIP, and now might be a good time to answer that?
Sure. So one of the things as I'm hearing Brian describe this is probably more toward the complex, just because of the observation. And because in terms of the students that he's talking about, there are many behaviors. When we're talking about, and I'm sorry I don't have a slide for it, when we're talking about brief, we're talking about a child who exhibits one behavior in multiple settings, or they may have many behaviors in just one setting. So that is our definition of, what students would be referred for brief FBA BIP. That being said, I would say that part of this process, as you begin implementing Tier 2 interventions, is you end up with the students who have more complex behaviors. And because of that, and I think I heard Tarika say this too, and what Brian was saying, and even in my example, that the task then is to narrow and treat it as a brief, focusing on one behavior that you feel, the criteria I usually use is it's the behavior that would increase the lifespan of the teacher the most, or the second criteria that you can choose is the one that's the most likely to succeed. And you choose that environment and you just focus on that. And when you're tracking to say, hey, is the brief FBA BIP process being successful, I would consider that plan for that one behavior to be one meeting. And if you then go back, a lot of times it's all it takes is that one, and other things begin to fall in place. But if you then come back and decide to choose a different behavior, what you're doing is many brief FBAs on one student because they're really a complex. And I don't know, Stephanie, you can chime in here, but it just has to do with, I think as you do the process, what you want to begin having staff do as you begin training them in this process is identifying students earlier. So it truly is a student that is exhibiting brief, one behavior in multiple settings, or it's only in one setting. But what happens is sometimes the interventions, like either the SAGE or the check and check out take care of that, or otherwise we really, there's kind of a mindset that this process takes so long so we don't look at those students. But you can see how this process would be much, much easier and go much, much faster if it really was one behavior or one setting. Stephanie, do you want to chime in with that one? What your take is on that?
I think you're explaining it well. And just logistically for a brief FBA BIP, we don't necessarily need to do an observation. It's more getting information collected from the teacher or teachers, depending on the type of school, elementary versus middle and high school. But everyone, we need to do as a school what meets our need and can fulfill to make the best plan for the student that we're looking at.
So if you're using this process and you are more complex students are coming to you and you are having success, then obviously you continue using it. And when you review the process, you may, as people become more comfortable with it, you may want to see what you can do to alter the entrance criteria so that you are getting kids, and I would say that would mean that you're getting younger kids. before the behavior pattern becomes more complex. But that, you know, that takes a while to do. Any other comments from people on the call with regard to that? I'm curious what your experience is in terms of who you're doing FBA BIPs with.
Well, I can start since I'm already on the mic here. We have it, I think, a little bit backwards where we start 3, 4, 5, and we're rolling this out to our other school, which is just grades 1 and 2, and they're starting just getting into this year, and then after that it would be our 4K building, which having you hear you talk about behaviors, we should have done that the other way. But
no, there's no should. You chose the 3, 4, 5 for a reason, for other reasons other than that. So it just, you know, there is no. It isn't as linear as you think.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah, and we've worked on kids that have been in check-in, check-out. Work with those kids, and they have not been successful for 1 6-week cycle, and they're still not successful in that second 6-week cycle. So those are kids that, as you mentioned, are probably more. Well, they are more. The behaviors are more complex. But it is interesting though if you can identify, and we have this year, we're much better at it. That one thing that really seems to be a hang-up for them, and having teachers change and adapt what they do a little bit. It's sort of like if there's some momentum that's built with that student when they are feeling some success. Parents are feeling a little bit better, and you see the boat go in a better direction. Doesn't fix everything, but it does help improve things, and some of the other work you're trying to do with that student becomes easier.
Yeah, and I think also it's a success for the teacher. And so they're willing to adapt a little bit more because they can see that even though it's more effort maybe in the front end, in the end they feel successful with the student, which is a huge, huge positive reinforcement for any teacher.
Yeah, that can be a tough road to hoe, and if you see something that's working, teachers buy in much more, and then other teachers in the building too feel more confident about the process that it's going to work, and it's not just a waste of their time.
Yeah, I'm going to throw something out here too, and this is just something that came to me with regard to the observation. I want to say personally, I felt uncomfortable not observing the student, and my background is school psychology, and you know that is like in my DNA to observe. And I think sometimes the observation had more to do with my comfort level than if it was really necessary. And the more you get staff to understand the ABCs of behavior, the teacher is observing the student all the time. So I do want to point out that we have some materials that you can use to train your whole staff in the ABCs of behavior, and if the staff is trained, like I said before, this whole process happens quicker. So I'm just going to real briefly go there. Sorry.
No, Lori, I'm glad you're doing that because I was going to actually suggest going to the resource, and these are really amazing resources that Lori created.
So there is a section, this has to do with classroom management for academic student engagement, and the basics are the rules and routines as they apply in the classroom and the acknowledgement systems, and if this is all in place, it just makes the BIP process and what you have to, it just makes it easier. But what I want to point out is the consequence system. And one of the pieces here, sorry, I'm trying to mute this, is there is a section that talks about the ABCs of behavior. And this is like at the very basic level, and you will have master teachers who automatically do this. If they have a child who's misbehaving in their classroom, they think about, well, what triggered that? And this is the behavior that I'm concerned about, and what happened immediately after? And they automatically alter that. But not everyone does that and has that framework. So I think to go through just a few slides in terms of, and a little bit of PD with the staff, to have them begin thinking along the lines of the ABCs of behavior. And this, again, this isn't for really complex behaviors, but within the classroom setting, you have kids that take more time from the teacher than others. And they're little annoying behaviors, but they can be very wearing. And so this is a really nice tool for teachers. There's some other things in here in terms of, there's a whole list of different classroom consequences, how to do planned ignoring correctly, just some things like that. But and also how to track minors, but I just wanted to point that out as a resource for you. Okay, so coming back to this, are there any questions that people have for Brian, or any other comments with regard to the conversation that we've been having around this? I heard Brian talk about the students that they have. I'd still like to hear from other people in terms of, do you feel that you're really getting students that meet the criteria for brief FBA BIP, or you're getting more complex students that you're then kind of narrowing the focus and focusing on one behavior?
I would say, excuse me, most of the students that we work with is typically, they have multiple behaviors, so we narrow it down to focus on one specific behavior. And typically, a lot of times, if we get one behavior, the other ones will follow, because a lot of the behaviors are related, and we kind of pick, through observation and conversation, which is the, I don't know if I want to say the biggest concern, but like the main should be our main focus. And typically, when we get one, others tend to follow.
Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so let me ask you this: when you are tracking, because you said you had an 80% success rate, when you get success with that one behavior plan, do you then, if you go back and look at another, do you do the whole process again with another behavior, or, I mean, how do you work with that?
A lot of that's student specific. If we get one and they're still struggling, then I don't know if we do the whole process over. Maybe we start at the 50% point. With it and have that conversation going back to a lot of the ABCs and what is a function of that behavior. And some of the students we have that one piece under control, and they're having success. The other ones follow, and a follow-up or modified plan isn't necessary. So a lot of that's student dependent.
Yeah, and I'm just throwing out that in terms, I mean, it makes kind of tracking, if you're successful, a little bit more complex. So I'm just throwing out that I think it's legitimate to, if you have success with one behavior and then there's another behavior cluster, to consider that a success.
Correct.
And, yeah. Jessica from Crandon, can you unmute and kind of say what your experience is around this?
I think we kind of see both. We had, I said I think more that at the beginning that special ed utilize this. I think we really do utilize this. It's just kind of laying it out there, and it's like, yeah, we do identify these behaviors ahead of time and that kind of stuff. But I think, yeah, we kind of get a mix of, one behavior or multiple behaviors.
Okay. 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 I notice that we are winding down on time, so let me see. Just want to, in closing, one of the things that we suggest, and it's up to you, but just to develop 1 or 2 action steps that will support your school's use of the brief FBA BIP process. It sounds like people have a lot of things going with it, and again, I think the more you use this, the more adaptations you can do to make it more staff-friendly, to increase the amount of fluency with all the staff in this process, to be able to get a better handle on who is coming to the problem-solving team. But just, you know, as long as you spent this whole hour with us, which we really appreciate, think about something that you want to bring back to your team. And then finally, our next session is April 18th, noon to 1. And if there's a particular topic that people would like to discuss, if you can please put that in the chat box before you sign off. And also tomorrow, if you can let your colleagues at the high school know that we have a Tier 2 high school specific TA session. So we're looking forward to that one because I know Tier 2 at the high school looks a lot different. So please let your colleagues know, and I believe, Stephanie, is this the link to be able to register for that one?
It is the link to register, but I'm pretty sure they can't just click on it. So if you go into the WisconsinPBISnetwork.org and the calendar of events and look at March 18th, there should be a link right on that calendar.
Mm-hmm. So what she's talking about, I'll just real briefly do this here. This calendar of events right here. And if you just click on Tier 2 Technical Assistance, that's where it will be. Okay, so we are going to leave this site open a little bit, so you can please jot down what you would like for topics for our next session, because we're going to be deciding that within a week or two, and then we will let you know. So please let us know.
Also, the forms from Sturgeon Bay are PDF, so if you would like a Word, that in a Word version, let me know, and I can get that to you.
Do we have a way of giving people this PowerPoint?
Yes, I can email the PowerPoint. Also, this recording and the materials will be on the web, hopefully very soon.
Where on the web? Can we navigate that for them?
Maybe if you go to home or go to the search engine and put in PBIS videos, I believe should get you to previous. Just I think you, Lori, I think you type PIBS instead of PBIS.
Oh, I did.
Or if you just type in videos on our search engine, I'm hoping.
There they all are.
No, that is not. That's
not
on it. No. Just type in videos in the search engine and see if that comes up. Go down to the second one. Otherwise, I have one more idea. Here it is. You will have to scroll through the video. So if you scroll down, you will see Tier 2 Community of Learners is from last year. Some of these are Tier 1 focused. Like, for example, if you're looking for an SAIG video, you can type in SAIG.
Mm-hmm.
This one will be called Brief FBA BIP Tier 2 Online Technical Assistance.
Okay.
So this is actually good to show, though, because we're trying to record all of our webinars, and you can see there's videos on culture responsive practices, Tier 1 technical assistance, which those are a half an hour, Tier 2 technical assistance, and some videos from schools that won the the video recognition last year at the conference.
Oh, there's Dave,
There's
and
Dave.
he's talking about the tiered fidelity inventory. So if you want to, if you're considering doing that, he has some really great advice for people, and that's about his experience doing it. So we made it on our website, Dave. I don't know, you may have.
I'm a YouTube star. Woohoo!
Tarika, could Tarika explain a little bit more of what she's looking for topics? She put templates for communicating Tier 2 decision-making rules to whole staff and teachers. Oh, I don't think she's still online. So maybe, Lori, that's something we can follow up with.
Okay.
Okay, I think we're all set.
Okay, very good.
Would you like to close us out, Lori?
What was that?
I guess we're all set. Are we?
Okay. Log us out. Have a great spring break if you haven't had yours yet.